Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I have a really interesting and very fun guest with me today. Her name is Debbie Weiss. She is a writer, author, and former attorney who had to reinvent herself after losing her husband George to cancer in 2013. She earned her MFA in creative writing at the tender young age of 56, and her writing career took off from there. Her essays have been published in the New York Times, Modern Love column, the HuffPost, Women's Day, Good Housekeeping, Reader's Digest, and more. Her book is titled Available as Is, A Midlife Widow's Search for Love, which is about creating a new life after widowhood, dating at midlife, and the decrease in the quality of middle-aged men. Debbie, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Cheryl. I appreciate it.
You know, I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your husband. And what I'd really like you to start with is to share with the audience what your relationship was like with him, because he was your prom date in high school and you dated, he was your one and only love.
He was, yeah. I knew him since I was 7. He was 11. He's 4 years older.
Wow.
Older guy. Our parents worked together. They were both scientists, and his mom and my dad worked together. And we kept kind of getting thrown together at family events over the years until we started dating when I was a senior in high school, and he was my prom date, and he was my one and only. I was a geeky high school kid, so not much there. And we were together. We actually didn't get married until I was 40, because I quit practicing law then, and he was a software architect on a financial planning program, so we didn't want the marriage penalty, but we were together nonstop for 32 years. And again, after I quit law, we had another 9 years together before he passed, and he was pretty much my life. Neither of us were real outgoing. We didn't have a lot of outside friends. We didn't have kids. So it was kind of just the two of us. So when he was gone, I didn't have a lot of interior resources.
Wow, that's what an incredible shock too. I mean, even though, you know, he was ill, you never can quite prepare yourself.
No, you don't expect it. I mean, I kind of did, because my mom died when I was 10.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
I'd had a bizarre loss. You know, she was 42 after an illness, a surprising illness earlier in life. So I was kind of shocked, because I kind of felt like I already went through this. You know, this shouldn't be happening twice. So yeah, I was particularly shocked. I sort of felt like I'd already made a down payment on loss or something.
Right. Life doesn't work that way though, does it?
No.
So once he passed and you found yourself completely alone, because as you had said, you kind of had created almost like an isolated type of lifestyle with the two of you. And I could really understand that, because sometimes people are annoying. But what did you do from there? I mean, how did you try and go on without him?
Not always well, but you know, at first the things that helped me were having some healthy habits. I was a big gardener, so I would go garden. I'm a big walker. I lived then in a very nice little suburban town with a walking trail, so I could do my walks. You know, joined a yoga studio, and then I just, after some months, you know, 6 or 7, I just started to join some groups, because you know, it's hard to make friends as a grown-up. It's not like you're in college. It's like, well, where do you get your friends? So I started to join some groups that they didn't all match, but I had his old sports car. So the sports car club president was so nice when I called him about maybe selling the car. I'm like, okay, I'll join you guys. And then I joined the local Rotary, which again wasn't really me, but people were super nice. Everybody was nice. Yoga studio, women, you know, had some women. Eventually I discovered hiking, and then my weekends were so much better. But I just kind of started to, and of course writing classes. So I just started to.
So did you always have the heart and soul of a writer? I'm just really curious about that.
Well, I always loved it. You know, when I was in grade school and through high school, I was the one, you know, I took writing classes and I wrote stuff, and I think I won like a school-wide writing contest. And then I was an English major in college, which I loved, but not creative writing. I don't write fiction. I can only so far write nonfiction. And then I killed any aspect of my creative mind. I also was a great baker and such, and went to law school and pretty much, killed off my creativity.
Yeah, I'm really curious. How did you end up in law school then?
Well, let's see, I graduated from college in 1985. So I started law school in 1985. And, this was yuppie time. My generation, our generation, we're yuppies, right? We were all thinking, gonna get the car and the house and and a relationship. I was already with George. He had a job at Hewlett Packard as a software guy, actually hardware there. But, I don't think I was terribly creative. So instead of thinking about exploring the world, I thought about being employable. In retrospect, maybe not the best choice, not so interesting, but those are my options. And at the time, you see, a local
So
law
how many
college
years did you work as an attorney?
11 years.
Wow. And what did it feel like to walk away?
Oh, so much lighter. So good. It was very stressful. We had 6-minute billing increments on our timesheets. I started to dream in grids of 6 minutes. We had billing requirements, which worked out to far, far more than a 50 or 6, even I would say a 60-hour week if you're ethical.
Right.
It was very
Wow.
sexist. I found it very sexist.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
leaving was great. I always said I'd go back and get a better kind of a legal job that was more suitable to me. But just never went back.
So right away, did you know when you left the law that you were going to get your MFA in creative writing, or did that happen after George passed away?
Oh, nothing like that. No, I just took a weekly class in an adult education center and wrote little stories, not very seriously. I didn't get serious until after George passed, and I went back to a weekly class, and then from there a group, and then I started submitting, and then I got the MFA. George passed in 2013, and I started the MFA in 2018.
Wow.
So it
Well,
took a while.
congratulations on going back to school and getting your MFA,
Oh, thank you.
especially, as a mature adult.
Oh, yes, I was. Yep, I was. There were a few other older women, though, my age in my
Mhm.
classes, so
Well, we have a whole lot to say,
we do.
a whole lot of lived experiences that need to be shared with the world. My personal belief system, anyway.
I agree, and I think those experiences haven't been valued and they haven't been sought. So I feel like this is a time. I mean, I'm reading so many more articles in like the New York Times or just my news feeds about menopause these days and midlife. But I mean,
Yeah.
great. It's not so taboo anymore.
Right, exactly. And I think just the whole stigma of midlife or what to expect at midlife is completely different. I mean, my first book actually is about fitness over 50, where we bust the myths of aging and punch Father Time in the mouth and tell the naysayers to shut up and mind their own business and go away.
I agree. I do a yoga class that's really hard, and a couple women are my age, and a lot of them are much, much younger. But we're all wearing our Lululemons or whatever, and we're all of varying degrees. It's not based on age, and it's wonderful to commune. So I really wish, for example, Lululemon, that we could see some yoga props and things with older women in the ads. I don't quite get why we're so invisible and why we seem sort of ready for an ice flow. It's like modern medicine never advanced, and I don't get it.
Well, it's interesting. I actually study pole, which some people call it pole dancing, but it's so much more than that. It's really hard work. And we have women, and there's guys in there too, but it's mostly women from the age of 18 to 72.
Nice.
And even as I look through some of like the sites where they show other, women doing pole, you can see women who are obviously, past the age of 50. So it's actually really exciting. And, it's just wonderful to be a part of that.
That would be, yeah.
Yeah, and part of sharing that message. So speaking of, trying new things, when did you decide it was time to try and start dating?
Oh, goodness. 14 months after my loss. It had been over a year, and I was lonely. I was joining some groups and things, but I wanted, it was 50. I think, yeah, Def was 50. And I wasn't ready to give up on companionship.
So how did you go about it? I mean, how do
well,
you start dating when you're 50 and you've been married forever?
cautiously, for me, cautiously. I joined J-Date. It's a site for Jewish people. I'm Jewish, and I thought it would be smaller, a little saner. I was hoping for a saner kind of smaller pool so I could kind of dip my toes in. And I'm an ex-lawyer. My work was always a lot of research. What do you put in a good profile? What should your pictures look like? So, yeah, a lot of research, and there I was.
And I think it's more important even to know what not to do rather than what to do.
Yes.
Okay, so then what happened when you started getting, like what I'm going to call friend requests or match requests?
Well, I combed through a lot of them, and went on a few dates and was very disappointed. And kind of from there, I sort of changed my view a little and joined some more sites to get a larger pool of people, and different kinds of people. And just started that awful learning curve that comes with online dating, because it's a learning curve, and it's generally pretty unpleasant as you kind of get that knowledge, I think.
Did you ever feel like giving up?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. All the time.
I have a lot of, a few friends over 50 who are single again. And, it's just like this love-hate relationship. They'll get into it and then it's like, I'm done. I'm never going back online again. And I'm done with online dating. Then a couple of months later, they're like, well, okay, I'll try it again. I'm going to use a different tactic or strategy or whatever. So it's one of those on again, off again things. It's really interesting from somebody sitting on the sideline going, oh God, I wouldn't, I couldn't imagine dating online.
Well, I lived in a relatively, small suburban town. Is very much geared for married people and children. So if I wanted to meet people, this struck me as the best way to do it. It was the only way I knew how to meet a lot of people.
Right.
I wasn't going to join, I don't know what I would join in the city, a car racing team or something.
That's pretty funny. So I did read your, one of your, I think it was the most recent blog. I don't know if it was most recent, but I saw it on Facebook this morning. So I read it. It was something about dating over 50 and getting back into that, dare I say, forgive me for saying it, like cesspool. And
that's what I call it.
Oh, good. And you described some of the guys that you went out with, and what were your expectations and how did your expectations match up with reality?
Apparently my expectations were ridiculous. I expected sanity. Silly me. One thing I think preliminarily is it's an extraordinary waste of time. So you have to be very careful. And, you don't, unless you want a distance relationship, there's no need to communicate with people in other countries and states, unless you are up for that. And there's also no need for these ridiculous long text things and all this messaging, and then people vanish, or they'll tell you they're secret agents and they'll get in touch with you sometime. I think that means they're married. So for one thing is just screen. But the thing that bothered me the most was that most of these people had no capacity for joy. A lot of these men were really living in the past. My first date was with a guy great looking guy, great credentials, and then on about someone who I think kind of looked like Pamela Anderson from what I can figure out, and broke his heart multiple times. Mommy issues, got a lot of that. So it was really disappointing that so many of these people were disillusioned, and that I did write about, and it was popular because, I was newly widowed and I was looking for joy, and I figured at least would be a bunch of people going, hey, we're still alive. It's sunny. We're healthy. Let's enjoy. And I just got this morass of really unhappy, disillusioned, pessimistic guys who really were still kind of in some ways living with their exes. And I found that very disappointing.
They sound like they were all rather bitter, especially, even as I was reading the story, which it was really very funny. As I was reading it, it was like, wow, they're really carrying their baggage. It's almost like I could see them walking around with all of these, chains and balls, iron balls, and you're just like loaded down. It was like, wow, get rid of some of that stuff.
No, you're right. It was like the Bob Marley. I kept thinking of
Exactly.
the
That's
ghost
exactly
Bob
what I was
Marley.
thinking
Yes,
of.
yeah, I hadn't thought of that image, but that's amazing. Then add some suitcases, a whole bunch of Samsonite out here.
Wow. So, what happened then? How did you persevered, and
I
then you
did.
met a guy that was pretty normal.
Yeah, I don't know that he's normal, but he was chivalrous and charming and attractive,
Oh, that's not
and
normal in these days.
that
No.
that's not normal, right? And he also wasn't living in the past. He was living now.
Mhm. So when you first met, did you know that he was the one, or was it like, oh, I think maybe I can let my guard down a little bit? What was that like?
Well, when we first met, I just gone through a really bad breakup with another person who was a very poor choice on my part.
Mm,
It was awful. So I was kind of upset, but I'd gone back online and I was leery. I was very pessimistic.
mhm,
And my partner Randall, his mother had died 9 months ago, so he was sad,
mm,
but he liked my pictures, and we met up and we decided to be friends.
mhm.
And he had come from work that day. He was wearing a blazer and a plaid blazer. He's a realtor and really, nice shoes. And I remember thinking he's a little grown up for me. He's kind of dressed up. But we had a great conversation, and I did feel a capacity for friendship.
Mhm,
So that's where I was.
mhm. And that was 5 years ago?
About 5 years, yeah, yeah. Our first real date was Memorial Day 5 years ago. That was our
Mhm,
first big date.
mhm. And then how long have you been cohabitating?
We've been cohabitating about a year and a half.
Mhm. And how's that going?
It's going good. It's a challenge because I live by myself for like 7 years or something when my
Wow.
husband passed. So I got used to I'm a frighteningly neat freak. He's a neat freak too, but we're neat freaks in different ways.
Mhm,
I'm used to kind of doing what I want when I want to without thinking that somebody else might also enjoy the family room or
mhm,
that
mhm,
last piece of cake
mhm.
or, that absolute silence isn't a way you can live with another person. I'm already maladjusted. I'm an only child.
Ah,
So but it's been wonderful. I mean, I
mhm,
love it. I feel like I
mhm,
have a new best friend. We grow closer together. We enjoy, dinner and movies. It was
mhm.
great. The two homes was feeling like a lot of work.
Yeah, it's complex. Yeah, complicated. Yeah, well, I lived alone for 7 years after I moved out to Colorado. I come from a family of 5 girls, and I'm
Mm.
number three. And that was actually the first time in my life that I ever had my own bedroom, let alone my own apartment. And I just loved it. And then, of course, when my husband and I got married and we moved in together before the wedding, much to everybody else's horror, it was just like, oh God, not only living with another person again, but I had no brothers, so I had no idea what it was like living with a man. I mean, I had my dad, but that was a completely different situation. It was like, oh wow, you guys really are slobs. I mean, it was just a shock to my system.
I know what you're saying. I do.
Mhm,
Yes, there is
mhm.
something about that. They just seem to create a little more stuff and mess everywhere.
Mhm.
I mean, I really hadn't expected to have to make room for this much sporting goods.
That's pretty funny. So now I want to go back to when you started writing your writing career officially, and the fact that you got published in so many incredible publications, the New York Times, the HuffPost, Women's Day. I mean, how did you go about, did you just write a bunch of essays and just toss them out there and see what happened?
Yeah. I was honestly extremely lucky. That
Mm,
looks more impressive than it might be otherwise. Huffington Post had a blogging platform. And if you
mm,
had a few publication credits and you knew the secret email address for Ariana Huffington, you could do that. And I did
mhm.
that. I do want to say, though, that I have something coming up in Huffington Post April 8th that I got in myself in a
Oh, good for
much
you.
harder platform now.
Mhm,
Women's Day, Good Housekeeping, all that. That was through it was called The Mix, and it was a company that fed content to the Hearst magazines. Those were all Hearst magazines, and you had to
mhm,
compete to get in. But again, a few publications you could get in, and then you had 48-hour turnaround to get your pieces in. They'd give you prompts 5 days a week. They paid you the amazing sum of $50 if I took one of your pieces,
Mm-hmm.
and 48-hour turnaround. But I was a new writer and the editor was amazing. And so I did that and I got 8 pieces published as a new writer and some syndicated. And some even were a little popular. So my $50 would be even like $53.87. You know, it was impressive. The New York Times, I did a few years later, and that was just a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
I just really zeroed in on finding a good topic, reading the documents about how to do this, and it worked. That was 2018 though, and I really hadn't submitted anything since until the book came out.
Well, yeah, you were kind of busy writing a book.
That's true too.
Yes.
But I just want to tell your audience though, it's really hard to do this because things change. So like the Hearst magazines, I loved getting into those for that company, and it was wonderful. But once it was done, the editors at those magazines, they didn't know me and I couldn't get anything placed, and I still can't. So I don't want to give people a great view about doing this freelance writing thing. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I haven't, I'm still figuring it out.
It's really interesting. I think people have this image of writers and authors of having this really exciting romantic life, and they have no idea what reality is like.
You make money, you lose money with everything you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It was, my most recent book just hit #1 on Amazon last month in 3 genres. I was so excited about that, of course, put it on Facebook. And I ended up going to a ballet class a couple days later, and I had like 3 people come running up to me and saying, "What's it like to be a best-selling author? Are you rich now?" And I just bust out laughing. It says, "No, I had a few moments in the sun, and now we're back down to where we were before."
Yeah, I had a little bit of success on Amazon with a few things, you know, when the book first came out, and then it kind of sunk, and I put it at 99 cents. I just took it off there, but the Kindle's still a good, you know, bargain. But yeah, it's, yeah.
Yeah, I told another local author, I told her, I said, it's like a sugar rush or a sugar high.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like you're buzzed, and then all of a sudden you crash and go, oh.
Very much. It's very much up and down.
So tell us about something I found on your profile that I thought was absolutely adorable and hilarious, the hungover widow.
Oh, that's my blog. That was my blog when I started out. So that was what I called my blog. It's my email right now. My website is Debbie Weiss Author. It used to be the Hungover Widow. Well, when my husband died, I was very upset and I drank more. Manhattans were my thing. And the other thing was I felt like the word widow was somehow had so much like pre-existing ideas attached to it. You know, there was the good widow, the widow who stays home and worries about everybody else and her life is over. And then there's sort of, you know, the merry widow who's, you know, in that image, which didn't fit. Right. And what I really just felt was miserable and disturbed by this. And people are like, "You're so strong, you're so this." It's like, no, I'm not. I'm miserable. So I picked hungover because it kind of captured how I felt. I didn't think we needed to idealize this.
Well, no judgment here. I told you in one of our conversations prior to recording that my sisters and I drank our way through 2 funerals, it was a year of end stage leukemia, poker, and 2 funerals. And that's the way we got through it. You do what you have to do.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes you can, you know, sometimes you can make juice and eat, you know, have your kale, and sometimes that just isn't life.
Sometimes you need the cake.
Yeah, you need the pizza.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then when did you decide it was time to write the book? And I'm really curious, when you started writing your book, were you using some of your blog posts as maybe either an outline or a foundation to then elaborate with the book?
Well, you know what I was very fortunate in that I started in 2014. I was taking writing classes at the Adult Education Center that were pretty, you know, you just get positive feedback. And that's when I started dating. So I was writing vignettes and I was putting some of those on my blog, and they weren't good. I couldn't write then. I didn't really know how. My early blog posts are, oh my God. But I did have sketches of these people. So if, this guy's biggest features, I could at least see, cowboy belt, Tony Llama, lizard boots, paunch over riding, straining denim, said, hey, little lady, graduate degrees are wasted. At least I would have those, I'd have this, I had images. And then I probably got serious about writing the book 2016, a few years later. I mean, it took years. I started just putting things together and then structuring it and trying to make it good enough to really be worthy of publication. Getting into craft and getting the MFA, that was a whole different. So I would say probably 2017 is when I started to say, okay, what are you really going to do? I started to look at this as something that had to be at a certain level.
Right. Right. It surprises me sometimes, there's in Denver, we've got a huge population of independent authors, writers, blah, blah, blah. And I would go to like networking events, and there was this one business boot camp I went to one or two times. And, they were always talking about your book, and it's so important. And, you need to do it right. And then they started showing some of their books, and I'm looking at it going, that's not a book, that's a pamphlet. I want something I can really be proud of. So ended up getting involved with a professional writers group and publisher.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with an indie publisher. She writes, and they're known for, curated. They only do certain number of books. The books have to meet a certain standard. The books, when they're finished, look like any Big Five publisher with beautiful covers and blurbs by best-selling authors. So yeah, I wanted this to look like a real thing. I wasn't trying to do a free pamphlet for something. I wanted it to look like a real book.
Yeah, and very professional.
Exactly.
And it is very, but so we're going to take a moment. I'm just going to ask you to show us your book for the people who are watching this on YouTube so they can see the image of the book with your beautiful face behind it. Yeah, lovely. That's a really beautiful cover. I love the strawberries.
Me too.
Yeah. And especially that one in the middle, just kind of standing out. And the font is really pretty too.
Yeah, they did a beautiful job. I had a few changes, but they did a wonderful job. And I love it because it's a little bit girly looking. And this is my story as a woman. And I also love it because as a widow, I felt very much kind of standing out and on my own. And a little bit like when I went to stuff like this Red Strawberry, where it's like, well, look at these happy married people. And I used to be one too. And now here I am kind of red and unhappy.
Yeah. And I love the color. It's a matte cover too, isn't it?
It is. It's matte. Yeah.
Because I love the feel of that covers.
It's just kind of silky.
Yeah. Very nice. Well, congratulations on the book. And when was it published?
September of 2022.
Okay, that's right. Okay. So let me see. What are some of the most important lessons that you have learned on this journey? Okay, because widowhood is hard.
Oh, yeah.
And just the shock of, oh my gosh, all of a sudden my life's partner, the love of my life, the man of my dreams is gone. Where do I go from here? What do I do?
Yeah, that's true. Things I learned, first, be gentle with yourself. I think we make it harder because we judge ourselves. I didn't feel that I was doing enough when I was widowed. Like I wasn't changing my life enough or accomplishing enough or getting through things quickly enough or figuring things out. So I think if we take out the judgment and be gentle with ourselves, that's a big one. Another one for me was taking small steps forward because it is so hard to do things differently. If you're a part of a couple, it's very hard to go out alone to events and be like, where's my person? So for me, it helped to join some groups, hiking groups, yoga, and it had more single people. And that were during the day. Dinner party clubs weren't for me early on.
Yeah.
So definitely starting slow with a few things you're comfortable with, and then, branching out further. Maybe, for me, it was going from an evening yoga class to maybe a yoga retreat where I knew some of the women. And I didn't have like a friend to go with, and then from there, I'd make some friends and coming back going, oh, hey, that was so great hanging out. Do you want to go for dinner? Do you want to, and from there, things take off a little bit and you can start to have a more full life. So definitely taking small steps, And with respect to dating or anything, waiting until your new self is formed. I mean, this is a huge amount of work. You're creating a new self as I don't want to say a single person because widowed is different, but you're creating a new self on your own. You're creating a new self as an independent, uncoupled person. And I think it's just a matter of giving yourself time and definitely not dating because there's so much negative energy out there until you feel secure in your new self and what you want.
Boy, that is excellent advice. Thank you for sharing that. There's also something that this was on your website when the description of the book and everything. By the way, I loved what Kirkus Review said about you. I can't remember exactly what it was word for word, but it was something about, your sense of humor.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yes, I put that at the top. I've probably memorized that review.
What is it then?
Weiss is a dryly amusing writer who tells it like it is.
Yeah,
I put that at the top of my site.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. I thought that was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. I love that too. I was very pleased because I was looking for reviews. Again, as an indie author, you have to do this stuff. So I was the Kirkus review wasn't starred, but it was really good. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, that was a really good review. So there was something else though in the description then right below that when you were talking about that you wanted to let people know, newly widowed women, that it will get better.
Yes.
And like you're wanting to give them hope.
That's true.
And it will get better, but sometimes it takes a way lot longer, more than what you thought.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little more about that?
Oh, thank you. That is a good point. That is one of my big things. Yes, you will feel better, but it takes way longer than you think. And that's because, for me, it was 3 years before I had a brain back. I was my late husband's caregiver. He was in denial about his cancer. This left me with some PTSD.
Oh,
I mean,
I'm
people,
sure.
Yeah, people are, I got grief counseling. That's another good thing to do. It just takes a long time for your brain to reconstitute. It's a shock. It's a physical shock. There were days, I know I felt pretty trashed, or I'd do something that was unpleasant and I would take it really hard and I'd need another day to recover. Or, I wasn't loving my life, but I was going to a few group things and I had to kind of wait for those to germinate and figure kind of what to change or add in some travel, take out the Rotary Club, or ultimately moving and ultimately finding love again. But again, it took many years and I wouldn't have been ready after a few years. It just takes a long time, I think, for that shock to get over. And if, you fortunately are someone with a capacity for joy, for that to heal and come back. And then for the positive things you do to add up to start to feel like you've made major changes.
And I want to talk about that process, because it's not a direct line. It's not a steady trajectory toward feeling better. That line is up and down. It almost looks like, run a VTAC. If you're looking at an EKG, it's up and down. It's a heck of a roller coaster ride as you're going through it. So it is not a steady, progress.
I agree. You have, there's good days, there's bad days, there's good times, there's bad times. I remember going on my first trip away, actually with George's parents, and we went away to Paris, and I'd never been, and it was amazing. And I felt somewhat better. It was 2015, it had been a few years, and I spoke French, and I saw wonder, and it was beautiful. And I started to see that I could love to do things that I hadn't done with George, because I didn't miss him so much by my side. I had all these epiphanies. I thought, wow, I'm getting better. And then I came back to my house and I was kind of so sad to be sort of still in the same place, still in the aftermath of a bad relationship I was having then. And I slid way back down again, and it took a while to get any joy again and go, well, you can get that back. But yeah, I've seen, grief described as like a tangled skein of yarn. So it's like a ball of yarn, but it's unraveling in places and it's knotted in places. Yeah. It's not linear. It's kind of, this is weird, but it's like anything, like dieting, you slip up, but if the whole point is if you just go back, you're fine. I would spend a few days in bed or something.
I was wondering, I figured. Yeah. And when that does happen, when you kind of hit that, rock bottom again, it's like a punch in the gut.
It is. It's so lonely to feel that way. because it's something you normally would do with a partner if you're sad. It's so, at least for me, it was very hard not to have my person, my best friend, to bounce things off of, because suddenly it was just me. And aside from my dad, there was nobody else I really trusted to kind of anchor and offer real input. Certainly not the men I'd met.
I want to talk about the PTSD just for a few moments, because that's something that people probably don't think about. But, I mean, that's the first thing I think of when I hear that somebody's spouse passed away from cancer, or a long illness. And people might think, well, it was expected because they were ill for so long or whatever, but it's almost like it drags it out. And just as time goes on, you're waiting for the next shoe to drop. You're waiting for the next infection or the next hospitalization or the next reaction to a treatment. I mean, it just builds up and up and up, so that you're always in that fight or flight situation. You're always in your sympathetic nervous system.
Right. Yes. That was exactly what it was like. And it's really hard because the time is dragging on. With my late husband, again, denial, he didn't let us get enough help. So I was up a few times a night helping him with a nebulizer and pneumonia. So I was getting more sleep deprived, more stressed. And it's cumulative, because you thinking, well, I can't live this way. And it's going on, and he's declining and he's in pain. So it's not like it's going to get any better. It's only getting worse, but it's taking longer to get worse. So then you feel guilty because you don't want to limit anybody's time. It's just an unbearable way to be living. And each day is getting worse. I was certainly getting more depleted. I had terrible hives from stress. Nobody could figure out why. I was on prednisone for the hives. I got a guy to prescribe it way longer than you should. But I was like, well, I can't, I got to function, So yeah, it's really that bad. I think it would have been better had my husband at least not been in denial, and we would have had more help. But yeah, I think that's so insensitive. And people are like, well, it's like a relief. He's gone. He's in a better place. Now you can get on with it. So that's great. You did your tour of duty or whatever, you're done. Yeah. And that's just not what that's like.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. I actually have a friend who, her husband went through something that was incredibly prolonged illness. And I can't remember if it was it was a tumor. It started some kind of tumor in the back of the ear. I can't remember the name of it right now. And so they wanted to remove it, and, okay, they did. And then, oh my goodness, it was a cascade of horrible events that happened after that, in ICU for weeks, on the ventilator, eventually trached. And, of course, my friend being the advocate for her husband, she was always there in the hospital and blah, 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 blah. And he did get better, and he did get almost back up to full function. He has some neurological deficits, but she said to me, when it was after he was home and, he was going to therapy, he was really doing great. She looked at me and she says, I couldn't believe it. She says, I have PTSD. And I says, well, of course you do. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And she was just so shocked. And I'm like, that level of stress, and the things just kept compounding one on top of each other. So for anybody listening, if you do have a loved one who has an illness, and you're the caregiver, or even if you're just a support person, understand that you have to take care of yourself. It is really taking a toll on you as well.
I agree so strongly with that. Yeah. And it's like, you feel guilty. I mean, I felt guilty because I was angry and I was depleted, and I raised my voice, and I had a lot of guilt. That's where I started writing about caregiver guilt, actually, in the Huffington Post. But it's normal.
That's good. So, if you can send me the link to that later, email it to me, and I will include that in the show notes, because I think that's a really important one. I think people would like to read that or hear that. It's a nice resource.
I'll send an article. It's really old, but I'll send it. But what happened is I was so upset then, and I felt like I was hiding an ugly secret about how my flawed caregiving. And when I wrote that, I got like 90 comments very quickly from people saying, I've been there, it's not your fault. And it was so validating. It was so amazing. Those comments kind of saved me and kept me going forward, because it was that hard to feel that guilt. And the sense that, well, you're supposed to feel relieved when this is over. And you're just vibrating. I mean, I couldn't sleep. I was up at 4 a.m. You're watching your loved one disintegrate. You're thinking at any moment they could die. And I don't think people who haven't done that get it. And it's not like you recover from that immediately. I had grief therapy for that, and that helped.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, because that's very personal, but it's very important. And I mean, is this something you include in the book? Tell us a little bit more about the structure of the book and like
This,
the arc of it.
oh, well, the book jumps around. It was a very hard to structure, and people have said they really like the structure. I've done a few craft podcasts about like how to structure a memoir,
Mhm.
and it goes through pretty much my life in terms of the losses and creating new life in the book. It runs from the period of the first chapter is when I'm filling out my dating profile, because that's what this book is about, was trying to create a new
Mhm.
life after the loss. But it
Mhm.
also goes through the caregiving with George and what that was like. And I intersperse that in different places where it made sense, but it's not all linear. But I do go through the guilt, because that
Mhm.
informed this character in terms of not thinking she had a good life and not deserved a good life, and maybe not picking the right guys or thinking she deserved a good partnership. And she had to
Mhm.
overcome that guilt
Mhm.
and create a new self that wasn't so dependent on one person. And that's
Mhm.
what this is about. It doesn't end with my current partner. It ends with being a more independent person and seeing hope for the future as a single person, because
Mhm.
that's what was important. It wasn't a fairy tale idea of like,
Mhm.
from one prince to Sleeping Beauty falls asleep again and then another prince wakes her up, right?
Mhm. Right.
This had to be about how to create a full life and finding hope after that loss.
It's about empowerment too.
Very much
Mhm.
empowerment,
Mhm.
including, being able to look at a terrible pool of men and saying, great, I don't need this, no, thank you.
Yes. Oh, I couldn't imagine.
You
Couldn't
can,
imagine.
people can find out vicariously. And I've gotten a lot of women who've said, yep, those were my experiences too. It wasn't like I was on a crazy planet or something. This was, other women had this as well.
Yes, there was I was at a book event this past summer. It was right after my second book was released, and it was at a library, and it was a really nice venue. The library was having, new authors, to get up and talk about their books and stuff. But there was one woman, and I think the title of what was the title of the book? Yes, this shit really happened. And she
Okay.
was a woman in her 50s, and I guess she'd been divorced for, newly divorced or for a few years. And the whole book is just stories of her dating experience, once she went out into the world and started dating again. And every time, like, she would have a date or contact with a guy and she would tell her friends about it, they kept saying, you have got to put this in a book. And so she was telling us, we're in the audience and she's talking about her book. And she said, and not only did this stuff really happen, there's so much more that happened that's not in the book that I'm going to write another book. So yeah, I think sharing our stories and knowing that, you're not the only one really does help.
Oh, it does. It does. And I've heard from widowed and divorced women who've said that, and also widowed women who said that the book does offer them some measure of hope. I like to think in a realistic way, because not all of us are going to go to an ashram or travel the world and have a
Right.
great epiphany. It's more like, okay, this is here I am. This is where I'm at. What do I do from here? And
Mm-hmm.
some of it was great, making
Mm-hmm.
friends, women friends, yoga, and some of it was pretty mixed in terms of uh, experiments with middle-aged men.
That could be another title of a book. So
Yes.
anyway, where can people find your book and how can people get a hold of you?
You can find me on my website, Debbie Weiss Author. That's the best place to find information about me and my book. The book is available on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's That's probably the easiest, but it has regular distribution, so you can get it from any local bookstore. You can order it if you want to support your local bookstore, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is important. My local bookstore here in Benicia has been wonderful. So Amazon, Debbie Weiss Author, and then I'm on Facebook and Instagram as, not surprising, Debbie Weiss Author,
Mm-hmm.
and I answer
Excellent.
people's messages.
Excellent. Okay, very good. Are you on LinkedIn?
I am, yes. I am also Debbie. Yeah, I'm also Debbie Weiss on LinkedIn as well.
Okay, great. So I can connect with you there, LinkedIn. Okay.
Yes, I am.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for being on the show. I've loved this conversation. I think you're absolutely delightful. And thank you for sharing, your story and your message of hope and being very real and authentic in what women go through when they are newly widowed and how to take care of yourself and how to get, back into the game of life. I'm not going to say back into the dating pool. I'm just saying back into life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Cheryl. That's what I wanted, was something that felt authentic and real and not glossed over, because it doesn't work.
Yeah. So any last tidbits or words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with the audience before we close?
Just that there is hope. I mean, it's almost 10 years for me, but I do have a new life. I mean, I am my own guinea pig, and it's wonderful now, and it's even better because I found myself and because it's later in life and I can appreciate it. So what I really want to offer someone who's been through something like I have, other widows, I mean, different situations, worse situations, clearly, that you're on the floor and it's terrible, but that there really is hope. If you just have a little capacity for joy and you can get out and take a walk, even you can move forward.
Excellent. Great advice. Well, thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And everybody, thank you for listening. I really appreciate that as well. And please do share this episode with all of your friends. Do leave us a 5-star review on Apple. I would really appreciate that. I would love you forever, but I'm going to love you forever anyway. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.